Have you ever wondered why, in the exact moment a man moves inside a woman, something ancient awakens in him, something far older than his personality, his manners, or even his intentions? What he sees in her body in that moment is not just flesh, not just curves, not just desire. To the untrained eye, it may look purely physical, but in the deeper layers of the masculine psyche, the act becomes a symbolic descent into the feminine unconscious, a crossing of thresholds where instinct, archetype, fear, and longing collide. Because the truth is this: when a man enters a woman, the masculine psyche does not simply respond with arousal. It responds with memory, an ancient memory embedded in symbols, myths, and shadows. And whether he knows it or not, he is confronting something far greater than pleasure. He is confronting the feminine force that shaped him, sanctified him, wounded him, and continues to call him back toward himself. To Jung, the feminine body is not just biological territory. It is the living gate to the unconscious, the place where a man meets the parts of himself he lost, rejected, or exiled. And as he moves inside her, the first thing he sees, though he will never say it aloud, is a reflection of his own hunger for meaning. You may not realize this, but the moment of physical union forces his psyche to confront the questions he avoids in daylight. What does he worship? What does he fear? What does he truly want? And what does her body awaken that his mind has desperately tried to suppress? Most women never see this inner landscape. They only see his surface reactions, his confidence or hesitation, his dominance or tenderness. But beneath all that, a man lives with a secret truth. A woman's body is the one place where he cannot lie to himself. The masculine mask slips. His ego fractures. His projections rise. And everything he pretends to be, strong, unaffected, invulnerable, must face the one thing he cannot control, the emotional and symbolic power of her openness. Because openness is terrifying to the masculine unconscious. Her softness, her receptivity, her surrender, these things expose a man's deepest psychological wounds. They summon every unhealed part of him, every unresolved story with the feminine. The mother who nurtured him, the mother who smothered him, the mother who abandoned him, the first girl who shamed him, the lover who betrayed him. Her body becomes the canvas onto which every ghost returns. You might not see it, but he does. Not consciously, not verbally, but somatically, instinctively, without language. He sees the possibility of acceptance and the threat of rejection. He sees the fantasy of approval and the fear of inadequacy. He sees the woman in front of him and the shadow of every woman before her. This is why some men become tender, why others become aggressive, why some become reverent, almost devotional, and why others suddenly disconnect emotionally, even as their bodies stay engaged. It isn't about you. It's about the unconscious activation of his inner feminine, his anima, rising to the surface, and your body, in that moment, becomes the portal through which his psyche re-encounters it. When he moves inside her, he is not seeking pleasure alone. He is seeking restoration of something lost, a feeling of initiation, a sense of significance, a momentary dissolution of the masculine loneliness that has stalked him since childhood, the loneliness of always having to be the one who stands firm, who holds everything together, who must never collapse. But when a woman opens, when she receives him without resistance, something extraordinary happens inside him. For a moment, he experiences what Jung called the re-entry into the archetypal womb, not in a literal sense, but in the symbolic realm, where the masculine spirit longs to dissolve its hardness, its rigidity, its eternal state of vigilance. Her body gives him permission to soften in ways he cannot soften in the world. And yet, here lies the paradox that tears many women apart. A man sees in a woman's body what he cannot bear to face in himself. It is why he can be overwhelmed by the intensity of the connection he feels, why he may pull away after intimacy, why he sometimes avoids eye contact afterward, not because he didn't feel something, but because he felt too much. The feminine body exposes his truth, and humans fear their truth more than anything else. And you, without realizing it, become the mirror he did not ask for, but cannot escape. Some women mistakenly think, if I were more beautiful, more sexual, more confident, he wouldn't pull away. But no, the deeper truth is this: the more powerful your feminine presence, the more of himself he is forced to confront. Your body is not merely a vessel of pleasure to him, it is a psychological revelation, a disruption, a calling. And whether he rises to that calling or hides from it reveals the degree to which he has integrated, or rejected, his own inner feminine. What begins in the body soon becomes a journey through the corridors of the soul. As he remains inside her, the masculine psyche moves through waves, instinct first, then emotion, then revelation. Many women underestimate this inner unfolding, assuming a man's focus remains purely physical. Yet in reality, his inner world is shifting, rearranging itself in the presence of her openness. The deeper he enters, the more her body acts as a living oracle, revealing truths he does not consciously search for, but cannot avoid. And here is the most unnerving truth for many men. A woman's body, when she is emotionally present, becomes a form of psychological illumination. It exposes the distance between his desire and his emotional maturity, between his fantasies and his wounds, between the man he performs for the world and the man he truly is beneath the armor. A woman rarely understands that her body carries this power, not because she tries to wield it, but because the feminine essence, by its nature, evokes the masculine unconscious. He feels her softness, and suddenly the hardness he has worn for years feels like a burden. He feels her surrender, and the defended boy inside him trembles. He feels her warmth, and the cold parts of his psyche begin to thaw, whether he welcomes it or resists it. This is why men often feel conflicted during intimacy with a woman who awakens more than just their body. Because the feminine does not simply arouse the masculine. It challenges him, disarms him, confronts him with the danger of vulnerability. To enter her is to cross a threshold where instinct meets emotion, where pleasure meets exposure, where desire meets meaning. The union becomes a rite, one far older than the language he uses to describe it. If he has spent years numbing himself, performing strength without knowing what authentic strength truly is, her body will unsettle him. Not because of anything she does wrong, but because her depth calls forth the depth he has been. Oh, avoiding. The woman who carries emotional presence is not merely a lover, she is the mirror of his unconscious, the place where his shadow stirs. And every man carries a shadow, especially with the feminine. Inside the feminine body, he encounters the ghost of every woman who shaped him, the mother who soothed him, the mother who controlled him, the girl he desired but feared, the woman who awakened hope, the one who awakened shame, the one he let down, the one who broke him, the one he never forgot. These echoes do not vanish with age. They travel with him, living quietly beneath the structure of his mind, and the moment he enters a woman with genuine intensity, these echoes awaken. You may notice it. You may feel it. He becomes distant for a second. His breath shifts, his presence fluctuates, his body hesitates, not out of disinterest but because he has entered an emotional chamber he cannot fully map. The feminine body is not just a place of pleasure, it is a place of remembrance. To Jung, the union of bodies is the union of complexes. His anima rises, his inner feminine, the part of him that loves, feels, desires connection, longs to merge, fears abandonment, remembers tenderness, and aches for meaning. This inner feminine holds every hurt he has never resolved, and as he moves within her, that anima begins to speak, not in words, but in sensation, in impulse, in emotional tension. A woman often wonders, what is he feeling? The truth is, he is feeling more than he can process, more than he can articulate, more than he can consciously admit. Because the moment he enters her, he enters himself. He feels the pressure to perform, to satisfy, to stay in control. But beneath that, he feels the pull of merging with her, dissolving the rigid boundaries of his ego. This is a paradox the masculine psyche has battled for centuries, the longing for union and the fear of disappearing into it. To be consumed by the feminine is a primal fear, mythologized, symbolized, and expressed in every ancient story of goddesses who both bless and devour. Her pleasure becomes both invitation and test of his worth. Her breath on his neck becomes a reminder of his humanness. Her nails on his back become a reminder that he can be touched, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually, symbolically. And when she opens deeper, when her body welcomes him fully, he is struck by something few men ever confess: awe. Not because her beauty overwhelms him, but because her vulnerability does. For a man, vulnerability in another person is more destabilizing than desire. He knows what to do with desire. He does not always know what to do with being trusted. Many men collapse under this weight. Many rise within it. Whether he softens or withdraws in the presence of her openness reveals the degree to which he has made peace with his own inner feminine. Because only the man who has confronted his shadow can remain fully present inside a woman without fracturing. And you, without even trying, become the catalyst for that confrontation. The longer he remains inside her, the more the masculine psyche begins to reveal its hidden architecture. Most people imagine intimacy as a linear experience, arousal, climax, release. But in the Jungian landscape, it is a spiral, a descent into layers of instinct, attachment, memory, and unconscious longing. A woman's body, especially when she is emotionally awake, becomes the axis around which that spiral turns. He feels her, breath change, and something ancient stirs. He feels her hips move, and something guarded relaxes. He feels her respond to him, and a part of his psyche he thought was dead begins to reawaken. What he sees in her body as he moves inside her is not merely sensation, but meaning. The feminine form becomes a symbolic language, one his unconscious understands far more deeply than his thoughts ever could. Her curves speak the archetype of the Great Mother. Her warmth echoes the lover. Her openness invokes the muse. Her intensity stirs the shadow. Each movement, each tightening and loosening, becomes a mythic whisper, telling him truths he has not dared to articulate. And yet, the deeper he feels her, the more he confronts a quiet, terrifying question that lives inside almost every man. Am I enough for this depth? This question is not sexual. It is existential, because the feminine body represents not just pleasure, but eternity. The place where life begins, where energy transforms, where vulnerability is not a weakness, but an elemental force. To enter her is to enter a temple he did not build, cannot control, and is never truly prepared for. It forces him to measure himself, not just his desire, but his courage, his presence, his emotional capacity. He may not show it, but he feels it. He feels the weight of this moment in the marrow of his bones. For many men, the feminine presence destabilizes the illusion of self-sufficiency. He has built his identity on independence, on stoicism twisted into avoidance, on the belief that emotions are threats to masculinity rather than expressions of it. But inside her, that illusion cracks. He becomes aware, sometimes painfully, of the parts of himself he has numbed. Her warmth makes him realize how cold he's been. Her receptivity makes him realize how defended he is. Her desire makes him realize how starved his soul has become. Some women confuse his silence for disinterest. They misread his sudden seriousness as distance. But, in many cases, he is simply overwhelmed by the gravity of what he feels. Because her body does not just welcome him, it exposes him. She may be the one lying beneath him, or curled around him, or rising above him, but he is the one who has been laid bare. He sees himself reflected in her pleasure, not the persona he shows the world, but the man behind the armor, the boy who once loved without fear, the adolescent who was shamed for wanting too much, the young man who gave his heart to someone who treated it carelessly, the adult who learned to bury softness because softness meant pain. As he moves within her, these inner versions of himself rise to the surface, not to sabotage the moment, but to seek redemption through it. This is why some men become fiercely protective afterward, why others panic, why some feel a wave of grief unexpectedly, why others want to hold her for hours afterward without understanding why. He sees in her body the possibility of healing and the threat of repeating old wounds. Her moan may awaken his desire, but her tears may awaken his truth. Her pleasure may make him feel powerful, but her vulnerability may make him feel responsible. And responsibility, to the unhealed masculine, often translates into fear. Fear of failing her, fear of needing her, fear of being seen by her, because the woman who lets him inside her body is the woman who sees the man behind the mask. Even if he pretends otherwise, even if he laughs it off or distances himself later, he cannot escape the silent revelation. She knows a version of him he does not show anyone else, and whether he admits it or not, that terrifies him. But here lies the deeper truth, a truth many women never learn. A man is not afraid of a woman's body. He is afraid of what her body awakens in him. It awakens the desire to surrender control. It awakens the longing to dissolve into closeness. It awakens the ache to be understood without having to speak. It awakens the memory of innocence and the fear of heartbreak. It awakens the possibility of being changed. Because the feminine does not leave a man untouched. She leaves fingerprints on his psyche, impressions on his unconscious. Even if he forgets the details, his soul remembers the encounter, and you, without even trying, become the moment he returns to when he questions his worth, his strength, or his capacity to love. Something changes in him when the intensity builds, not just physically but psychically. The masculine psyche, though, often conditioned to appear stable and unshakable, is far more fluid in the presence of true feminine depth. The deeper the connection, the more his unconscious rearranges itself around what her body symbolizes. Not conquest, not possession, but transformation. As he moves inside her, his perception shifts. Her body stops being an object of desire and becomes the landscape of meaning he has been unconsciously seeking. Every breath she releases becomes a message. Every softening, every tightening, becomes a revelation. The feminine body speaks its own language, one that bypasses thought and strikes directly into the emotional architecture he has spent years trying to fortify. He feels her responding to him, and suddenly he realizes that intimacy is not something he does to her. It is something he enters with her. The union ceases to be an act of desire and becomes a moment of recognition, of seeing himself reflected in a feminine mirror that does not lie. Most men fear this mirror. Not because it exposes weakness, but because it exposes longing. Longing they have been taught to suppress. A man may ignore his feelings in the daylight, suppress his vulnerability in conversation, bury his wounds in silence, but inside a woman, none of these defenses survive. Her warmth dissolves the hardened parts of him. Her openness melts the shields he never admits he carries. Her pleasure calls the forgotten versions of himself back to life. This is why some men become more emotionally expressive during intimacy, why others suddenly soften, speak slower, touch with more care. His psyche is remembering something. that the feminine does not just receive him, it reveals him. He sees in her body the truth about his own emotional landscape. The tension in her breath reminds him of the tension in his soul. The way she reaches for him mirrors every moment he wished someone had reached for him. The sound of her pleasure reminds him that connection, real connection, is not something to be feared, but something to honor. And yet, he also sees the shadows. Because inside her, a man confronts not only his longing, but his avoidance. If he has been emotionally unavailable, her openness exposes that emptiness. If he has been disconnected from himself, her presence shows him the cost of that numbness. If he has been afraid to love, her vulnerability forces him to reckon with that fear. Some women misinterpret this internal shift. They think his intensity means he wants commitment, or his silence means regret, or his tenderness means certainty. But the deeper truth is more nuanced. He is processing the psychological weight of what the feminine asks of him, not verbally, not intentionally, but archetypally. The feminine essence asks a man one question, silently yet powerfully. Will you meet me here, not just with your body, but with your truth? For many men, the answer is both yes and no. Yes, because he longs to be met, to be known, to be seen. No, because truth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is where his deepest wounds live. The feminine body is not merely a place of pleasure, it is a place of awakening. And awakening is destabilizing. He feels her surrender and realizes he has not learned how to surrender without losing himself. He feels her trust and realizes he has not learned how to trust without being betrayed. He feels her emotion and realizes he has not learned how to express his own without shame. So he moves inside her with a paradox in his chest, the longing to merge and the terror of disappearing. This paradox is the masculine dilemma, ancient and unresolved. To become intimate with a woman is to risk being transformed by her. To stay distant is to remain lonely within himself. When she holds him close, when she pulls him deeper, when she opens without hesitation, she unknowingly activates the part of him that yearns for something he cannot name. He sees in her body a path toward connection he has avoided, a softness he has rejected, a wholeness he has forgotten. And for a moment, whether brief or extended, he feels the truth he cannot articulate. Inside the right woman, a man remembers who he could be. Not the performer, not the strategist, not the guarded, half-present replica of masculinity he has been told to embody, but the integrated masculine, the man who can feel without drowning, love without losing himself, desire without shame, soften without collapsing, and rise without domination. Your body becomes the threshold of that remembering. And as he moves deeper, the question shifts within him from, "Am I enough for this?" to, "Who do I become in the presence of this depth?" There comes a moment, slow for some men, sudden for others, when the physical rhythm dissolves and the psychological truth rises to the surface. A moment when he is still inside her, but what he is truly inside is not her body alone. It is the emotional field she carries, the atmosphere of her presence, the symbolic temple of the feminine psyche. And what he sees in that moment is the depth he has spent years avoiding, longing for, fearing, and searching for all at once. Her body, which once seemed like a destination, becomes a doorway. Through it, he encounters something vast, something he cannot possess or dominate. Not because she is fragile, but because she is powerful. Powerful in a way that does not seek to overpower him, but to awaken him. Inside her, the masculine psyche reaches an edge. That edge is not physical, it is existential. The edge between who he has been and who he could become. Between the man crafted by survival and the man carved by truth. Between instinct and consciousness. Between avoidance and presence. Many men never cross that edge. They withdraw. They disconnect. They change the subject. They joke to mask the tremor in their soul. They pull away after climax as though stepping back from a cliff they did not mean to approach. But the man who stays present, fully, breathlessly, vulnerably, present, experiences something that terrifies and liberates him all at once, the realization that the feminine is not his to control, but his to honor. And as he feels her around him, beneath him or above him, something inside him breaks, not in weakness, but in revelation. He sees the cost of his emotional numbness. He sees the illusions of control he has clung to. He sees the walls he has built around his heart. And her body, her warmth, her breath, her trembling, her surrender, becomes the catalyst for his awakening. He suddenly understands why so many men fear deep intimacy, because deep intimacy is a form of truth-telling, and truth-telling demands the end of the ego's illusions. Her openness tells him the truth about connection. Her vulnerability tells him the truth about trust. Her desire tells him the truth about his worth. Her body tells him the truth about his capacity to give and receive love. In her eyes, he sees the man he pretends to be. In her body, he sees the man he truly is. In her soul, he sees the man he could become, if he were willing to confront himself. And yet, the final revelation is not about him alone. It is about her. Because what a man sees in a woman's body as he moves inside her is not simply how she receives him, but whether he is worthy of being allowed into her deeper world. The feminine does not choose lightly whom she lets inside. Even when she acts casually, her unconscious is discerning. Her body speaks the truth before her mind does. If she opens deeply to him, it is because a part of her recognizes something in him, something that calls, something familiar, something resonant. But her openness is not a guarantee of his emotional maturity. It is an invitation to rise. When he is fully present in her, he feels the weight of that invitation. When he is not, he feels the shame of failing it. And this is where the feminine power becomes unmistakable. For all of human history, men have tried to define strength as dominance, control, conquest, impenetrability. But when he is inside her, truly inside her, he learns the deeper truth, that the strongest men are not the ones who conquer the feminine, but the ones who are transformed by it. He realizes that her body is not the battlefield of desire, but the altar of becoming. That her pleasure is not a trophy, but a mirror. That her vulnerability is not weakness, but initiation. That her surrender is not submission, but cosmic trust. And as he moves and breathes and trembles, inside her, he feels something he never expected. Gratitude. Not the performative gratitude of a man who enjoyed the moment. The soul-level gratitude of a man who understands that he has been allowed into the one place where truth does not hide. Her body becomes the place where his illusions die, where his armor loosens, where his defenses collapse, where his heart finally speaks. And when it is over, whether he stays, whether he leaves, whether he rises to the calling or retreats from it, there is one thing he will never forget: the feeling of being seen by a woman who was open, conscious, and present. Even if he denies it, even if he buries it, even if he walks away, his soul remembers her. His unconscious carries her. His shadow is marked by her. And his future relationships will be shaped by the echo of her depth. But she, if she understands her worth, does not need him to realize it. Her power does not depend on his awakening. Her value does not rely on his recognition. Her feminine alchemy continues with or without his presence. Because the woman who understands the psychology of intimacy knows this unshakable truth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.